Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zain Nahwi and I am the secretary of the Imam Hussain Day Organizing Committee for 2013. I would like to welcome all of you to our event, Imam Hussain Day 2013. We have a very exciting program lined up for you today featuring 4 very well-known, knowledgeable speakers. We have Maulana Rizwan Rizvi here with us today, as well as Professor Akbar Haider, Professor Karen Ruffle, and Sheikh Amir Mukhtar Faizi of Chicago, Illinois. Imam Hussain Day has been a long-standing event in our community, has been ongoing for over 34 years, and was started by a gracious group of individuals in our community. And now, 34 years later, we look forward to this great event. We hope you will join us, and we hope you will take as much from this event as we would like. Thank you very much.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाज़रीन। इस वक्त हमारे साथ लकीली डॉक्टर मंजूर हसन साहब हैं, मंजूर हसन रिजवी साहब। प्रोफेशन के एतबार से कार्डियोलॉजिस्ट हैं माशाल्लाह, दिल की ज़बान समझते हैं, दिल की बात करते हैं। तो आज हम इनसे बात करते हैं आज के प्रोग्राम के हवाले से हुसैन डे। तो डॉक्टर साहब, ये कब शुरू किया और कितने साल हो गए?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Hussain Day was started in 1981. We had a meeting of all the people at that time, 79 of the people who live in here. So we got a gathering in HUSSAIN, and we decided that Hussain Day should be established. You know that Imam Hussain is an embodiment of goodness and truth. So we all decided anyhow. So we started the first program in 1981. From 1981 we continued up to 24 years, and then there was a little bit gap, and now we have started again 2 years. So it's about more than 30 years the program is going on, and thank God very successfully going on.
So which I think this is the longest program or the oldest program started by the Mu'mineen of New York.
That is very true. This is one of the most established and the longest running program of our community. Yes, that's true. The first program of the course is in UNIS, United Nations International School, and Dr. Hussain Nasr came there, and we have always make sure that one speaker is from our community, 2 professors, at least a priest somewhere. And many times it has been in the university, and we were sometimes very interesting that some students jump up there, and they after hearing these speeches, they jump up and start talking about that thing. Oh, that's very great, and why don't you give me more information? So this has been a spiritual, social spiritual gathering, and really it has been fantastic all the time, very aspiring for everybody.
Thank you very much. And last, final but not least, obviously, a message for the youth, because after us only is the youth who will take this flag.
Oh, well, that is totally true. That's totally true. This program was started when we were youth 30 years ago. Now it is in the hands of the youth. This message, as I always say, and it's one the first lecture I gave in this thing, I told him, we have a sun in ourselves. We have a light post, and we should let others share this light. This light is for life. This gives you not only that having how to live good, but how to let others live in peace and prosperity. And that is the message, and that these young guys are going to take it. And you will see this now, this is mostly taken over by the young people. We just get in the background, collect some money because it's easier from us, funds and things like that, but they do the most of the job. So they have to take this torch and go to the next generation. Thank you very much. It is a fantastic thing that you do.
Thank you very much. जी डॉक्टर साहब, आप यकीनन we were talking in English, but I know you write beautiful शेर. I mean शायरी भी करते हैं, बहुत अच्छे शेर भी लिखते हैं. तो आज तबर्रकन आप हमें कुछ शेर सुनाना पसंद करेंगे?
आजकल असल में वो मज़ार पर और ख़ासकर सीरिया में बड़ा زور ہو رہا ہے ہمارے مزاروں کو توڑنے کا. تو جناب حضرت زینب کے مزار کے بارے میں 3 بند ہیں کہ روضہ حضرت زینب کی عجب شان ملی, منزل عظمت انسان کی پہچان ملی, محور صدق و صفا قوت ایمان ملی, صاحب قبر بڑی صاحب عرفان ملی, گلشن دین میں اس ذات سے شادابی ہے, یہ تو شہزادی کونین کی شہزادی ہے. راحت قلب نبی شاہ مدینہ ہے مزار, اور تمنا علی علم کا زینہ ہے مزار, سرخ رو جس سے حسن ہو وہ قرینہ ہے مزار, کربلا کو جو بچا لے وہ سفینہ ہے مزار, یہ تقدس کا اسے تاج دلا دیتی ہے, اپنے ظاہر کو یہ معراج دلا دیتی ہے. اور آخری بند ہے کہ دیدور آتے ہیں اس جا یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, مردہ ہو جاتے ہیں زندہ یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, شام کو کر دے سویرا یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, خود نمازیں کریں سجدہ یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, خاک اس در کی جو لگ جاتی ہے پیشانی پر, فخر کرتی ہے سلیمان کے سلطانی پر.
شام کو کر دے سویرا یہ ایسی جگہ ہے.
جی دیدور آتے ہیں اس جا یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, مردہ ہو جاتے ہیں زندہ یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, شام میں کر دے سویرا یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, خود نمازیں کریں سجدہ یہ جگہ ایسی ہے, خاک اس در کی جو لگ جاتی ہے پیشانی پر, فخر کرتی ہے سلیمان کی سلطانی پر.
کیا کہنا, بہت شکریہ, بہت شکریہ, تھینک یو ویری مچ.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم, بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. قال رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم, حسین المنی وانا من الحسین. میں ہندوستان سے حاضر ہوا ہوں آج اس حسین ڈے میں شرکت کرنے کے لیے. امام حسین علیہ السلام کا پیغام پوری کائنات کے نام آج سے 1400 سال پہلے سرزمین کربلا پر امام حسین علیہ السلام نے جو پیغام دیا اپنی شہادت پیش کر کے, وہ ہمیشہ ہمیشہ کے لیے قابل اعتماد بھی ہے, اور اس قابل ہے کہ ہر دنیا کا ہر شریف انسان اس کے بارے میں سوچے اور غور کرے, اور جتنا انسان سوچتا چلا جائے گا اتنا اس بات پر غور کرنے کے لیے مجبور ہو جائے گا کہ حسینیت نے ہمیں عزت کے ساتھ زندہ رہنے کی ہدایت دی ہے. ہمارے سامنے جو قربانی کی مثال پیش کی گئی اس کے پیچھے مقصد صرف یہ تھا کہ ہم ظلم کے خلاف احتجاج بلند کریں, ظلم کے خلاف آواز بلند کریں, ورنہ یزید جیسے ظالم و جابر کے سامنے چند لوگوں کے ہمراہ بجائے اس کے کہ سرنڈر کر دیا جائے, امام علی مقام علیہ السلام نے اپنی قربانی دے کر یہ ثابت کیا کہ نہیں, ظالم کے سامنے جھکنا نہیں ہے بلکہ ظالم کے سامنے سر اٹھا کے چلنا ہے. اسلام کی تعلیمات, اللہ کے تعلیمات کو دنیا کے سامنے عام کرنا ہے, چاہے اس کے لیے بچے کٹ جائیں, چاہے اس کے لیے بہنوں کو بے پردہ ہونا پڑے, چاہے خیموں میں آگ لگ جائے, لیکن وہ ساری چیزیں امام حسین علیہ السلام نے ہم کو بتائی ہیں. اور اس کے پیچھے ایک مقصد یہ ہے کہ انسانیت کا فروغ ہو, انسانیت آگے بڑھے. یاد رکھیے گا کہ آج دنیا میں جتنی خرابیاں ہیں, برائیاں ہیں, یہ سب انسانیت کو نقصان پہنچانے کے لیے ہیں. امام نے جو پیغام دیا اس کے پیچھے مقصد یہی ہے کہ ہم شیعہ, سنی, ہندو, مسلم, تمام فرقے جتنے ہیں یہ سب حق کے لیے آگے آئیں, اور جو انسان بھی سچائی کے ساتھ, صداقت کے ساتھ زندہ رہنا چاہے گا وہ امام حسین علیہ السلام کی طرف نگاہ اٹھا کے ضرور دیکھے گا, اس لیے کہ آپ کی زندگی ہمارے لیے نمونۂ عمل ہے. اور ہم یہ جانتے ہیں کہ دنیا میں کوئی فرقہ ایسا نہیں ہے کہ جو دوسرے سے لڑنا چاہے, کوئی ایسا نہیں ہے کہ جو آپس میں فساد برپا کرے, اس لیے کہ قرآن پہلے ہی کہہ رہا ہے کہ ہم نے فساد برپا کرنے کے لیے کائنات نہیں بنائی ہے بلکہ امن کے لیے بنائی ہے, اور حسین کا پیغام امن کا پیغام ہے. تو یاد رکھو کہ جب بھی تمہیں امن کی تلاش ہو تو ہماری طرف نگاہ کر لینا کہ ہم نے قیام امن کے لیے یہ جہاد کیا ہے, ہم نے فساد برپا کرنے کے لیے نہیں کیا, ورنہ ہم جمع کر سکتے تھے آدمی. ہمارے نانا کی امت کے لوگ بہت سے تھے مدینے اور مکے میں جب ہم آئے ہیں, حاجی وہاں موجود تھے. ہم اگر یہ پیغام دیتے کہ کون ہے جو ہمارے ساتھ چلے گا تو ہزاروں کی تعداد میں لوگ ہمارے ساتھ آ سکتے تھے, لیکن حسین کا مقصد تعداد نہیں تھا. حسین کا مقصد اسلام کو فروغ دینا تھا, امن اور بھائی چارگی کو آگے بڑھانا تھا, اور اسی مقصد کے تحت امام حسین علیہ السلام نے کربلا کا جہاد کیا ہے, اور ایک ایسا جہاد جو 1400 سال سے قائم ہے اور انشاءاللہ قیامت تک قائم رہے گا. لہذا یہ پیغام حسین کا ہے کہ جتنے لوگ بھی اللہ کے ماننے والے لوگ اس سرزمین کے اوپر ہیں وہ آپس میں محبت کے ساتھ, بھائی چارگی کے ساتھ دنیا میں قیام امن کریں, اور قیام امن کے لیے امام حسین علیہ السلام کی جانب دیکھنا ضروری ہے. انہی باتوں کے ساتھ آپ سے اجازت چاہتا ہوں. خدا حافظ.
بہت شکریہ مولانا صاحب. ایک چھوٹا سا سوال یہ ہے کہ انڈیا میں شیعہ سنی فسادات نہیں, ڈونٹ ٹیک می رانگ، میں یہ نہیں چاہتا کہ علامہ آفتاب فرمائے وہاں ہو جانے چاہیے، کیا وجہ ہے پاکستان میں وہاں پہ نہیں ہے؟ اگر یہ مذہبی تضاد ہے،
دیکھیے یہ مسئلہ کی تضاد نہیں ہے، بالکل نہیں ہے، قطعی یہ صرف سیاسی لوگوں کی ایک چال ہے کہ جس کے ذریعے سے وہ فساد کرا کے آپس میں اپنا الو سیدھا کرنا چاہتے ہیں، ورنہ کوئی شیعہ سنی ایسا نہیں ہے دنیا کا کہ جو امام حسین علیہ السلام کے نام پر لڑے، بجائے لڑنے کو آپس میں بھائی چارگی قائم کرتے ہیں. نہ جانے کتنے سنی حضرات ایسے ہیں جو تعزیہ داری کرتے ہیں ہندوستان میں نے دیکھا ہزاروں کی تعداد میں، اگر آج سنی تعزیہ داری نہ کرے تو شاید امام حسین علیہ السلام کی تعزیہ داری اس انداز سے نہیں ہو سکتی ہے جیسے آج ہو رہی ہے ہندوستان میں. لاکھوں اور کروڑوں کی تعداد میں تعزیہ رکھنے والے 25-25 لاکھ روپے کے تعزیہ رکھنے والی اہل سنت حضرات ہیں، یہ شیعہ حضرات نہیں ہیں. شیعہ حضرات بھی کرتے ہیں عزاداری، لیکن اہل سنت حضرات میں نے دیکھا کہ جو لوگ کمانے کے لیے بامبے جاتے ہیں، دبئی جاتے ہیں، وہ صرف محرم میں آتے ہیں، بجائے اس کی کہ عید میں آئیں محرم کرنے کے لیے اپنے آتے ہیں. میں نے ایک ساتھ تو پوچھا کہ آپ کیوں جا رہے ہیں، کیا کام ہے آپ کو؟ کہہ لگے ہم کو ڈھول بجانے ہے. میں کہا ڈھول بجائیں؟ کہنے لگے ہاں صرف ڈھول بجانے کے لیے، محرم کے ڈھول بجانے کے لیے آ رہے ہیں، دبئی سے آ رہے ہیں. بہت بڑی بات ہے. لہٰذا یہ سیاسی لوگ ہیں جو چاہتے ہیں کہ جتنا زیادہ آپس میں تفرقہ پیدا ہوگا اتنا وہ اپنا کام ان کا چل جائے گا، ان کی دکان چمک جائے گی، لہٰذا وہ اپنی دکان چمکانے کے لیے، ورنہ آپس میں کوئی ایسا نہیں ہے، کوئی منافرت نہیں ہے. دونوں امام حسین علیہ السلام کو سید الشہداء مانتے ہیں، دونوں ان کی عزاداری کرتے ہیں اور دونوں ان کے اوپر اپنی جان دینے کے لیے قربان ہیں.
مہندر سنگھ بیدی دیکھیے ماشاءاللہ سے کتنا اچھا مولا کہ شان میں کلام لکھتے ہیں، کمال کرتے ہیں.
بہت سے ایسے ہندو شعراء پیدا ہوئے ہیں کہ جنہوں نے، ظاہر سی بات ہے وہ ایک مصرع تو پوری دنیا میں پھیلا ہوا ہے کہ اسلام کو بیدار تو ہو لینے دو، ہر قوم پکارے گی ہمارے حسین. ظاہر سی بات ماتھر صاحب لکھنوی نے یہ شعر کہا ہے، تو یہ شعر کسی مسلمان نے نہیں کہا، کسی شیعہ سنی نے نہیں کہا، بلکہ ایک ہندو کہہ رہا ہے. وہ جان رہا ہے کہ امام حسین اسلام کی شخصیت ایسی ہے کہ اس کے اوپر پوری کائنات جمع ہو سکتی ہے اس نقطے کے اوپر، اور یہی ان کا مقصد تھا امام حسین اسلام کا کہ ہمارے نام پہ لڑنا نہیں بلکہ ہمارے نام کے اوپر امن قائم کرنا، یہی ہمارا مقصد ہے.
مولانا صاحب بہت شکریہ، تھینک یو ویری مچ.
بہت بہت شکریہ.
تھینک یو، بہت شکریہ صاحب.
The message of Imam Hussain is one that transcends borders, cultures, languages, faith, and religion. It is a message for all of humanity. As Imam Hussain stood on the land of Karbala and called out for anyone to help him, it was a message to all of humanity that you must answer the call for justice and human rights. As a result of Imam Hussein's stand on the day of Ashura 61 Hijri, today in every corner of the world, from Australia to Malaysia to Russia to Pakistan to the Netherlands to Iraq to London to the US and Canada, Imam Hussain is honored, revered, and remembered. And because of this message, millions upon millions visit Imam Hussain every year in Iraq, where the sounds of Labbaik Ya Hussain resonate through the city, and it is a renewal of our pledge to Imam Hussain. With that, I would like to initiate today's program. We have a very exciting event lined up for you, and you will see the details in the program flyer that were given to you when you first came in. We have a very exciting program, 4 very well-known, knowledgeable speakers who have joined us today. But to begin the program, I would like to invite Sayyid Saeed Shah to initiate the program with recitation of the Holy Quran. Sayyid Saeed Shah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون آمنت بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات پڑھیے
Saeed Shah for that very beautiful recitation. May Allah bless him and give him many years to serve his community. At this time, I would like to just take a moment to invite to the head table our guest speakers for today's program. I just request, as I introduce your name, if you know, my humble request would be to just join the head table based on the name tag that is situated there. We have today with us Maulana Rizwan Rizvi, the religious leader of Muslim Foundation Incorporated. We also have, and are honored to have, Professor Akbar Haider, who is the Associate Director and Associate Professor of Asian Studies and Islamic Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. We are also honored to have Professor Karen Ruffle, Assistant Professor of Religion at the University of Toronto, and History of Religion and Women's and Gender Studies. And finally, we are very honored to have our keynote speaker, Sheikh Maulana Mukhtar Faizi, who is the Director, Founder, and Spiritual Leader of Bethel Ilm Academy in Chicago, Illinois. Salawat. The President of the Imam Hussain Day Organizing Committee, Sayyid Bakr Rizvi, completed his engineering degree from Aligarh Muslim University and his master's in mechanical engineering and professional engineering from NYU's Polytechnic University. He recently retired from General Electric as an executive project manager. Mr. Bakr Rizvi has been involved in Islamic activities for all his life and is a founding member of Muslim Foundation Incorporated and IMAM Incorporated. Please welcome the president of today's event, Sayyid Bakr Rizvi, to the stage with a loud salawat.
Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the Lord of the universe. Respected ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. In the name of God, the most beneficent and most merciful, with blessing upon Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessing to all of you. By the grace of God, this is the 34th year of HUSSAIN Day being commemorated in North America. Thanks to God, each and every year, HUSSAIN Day has been a great success with a strong and diverse background of the speakers from the academia, religious and political sectors that has been comprised of scholars, professionals, theologians, thinkers, politicians, and others. The success of HUSSAIN Day has always been dependent upon the eager audience participation, mesmerizing the speaker's presentation, the different associations and their vital cooperation, and the coordination with the HUSSAIN Day Organization Committee. HUSSAIN Day is organized and commemorated to create awareness and to convey the true message of Islam, true message of Imam Hussain and his overall mission of peace, justice, and human rights. It provides a vision and guidance for the oppressed to stand up and raise their voices for what is right. Imam Hussain is the savior of Islam and the flag bearer of La ilaha illallah. As Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, Ajmeri Sharif, has said, Shah Hussain, Badshah Hussain, Deen Hussain, Deen Panah Hussain, Sadat, Nadat Dardas Yazid, Abqa ke binaye La ilaha Hussain. Sardar Nadat Dardas Yazid, Abqa ke binaye La ilaha Hussain. In short, Hussain is the king Hussain is the king, Hussain is the religion, and Hussain is the protector of religion. He did not pay allegiance to Yazid, but rather gave his head, sacrificing himself and his family. By God, he is the foundation of La ilaha illallah and the savior of Islam. Every Muslim and person can learn a great deal from supreme sacrifice, the dignity, the respect and love for religion, and the courage of Imam Hussain. As Mahatma Gandhi has said, I learned from Imam Hussain Islam how to achieve victory while being oppressed. We are in Muharram of 1435 Hijrah. We have indeed come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. Our new generation and youth of today and tomorrow have to carry the legacy of Imam Hussain al-Islam and keep the memory alive. As one famous poet, Janam of India, has profoundly said, अहले ज़मीं की आज सितारों पे है नज़र, अहले ज़मीं की आज सितारों पे है नज़र, वैसे तो कामयाब रहा चांद का सफर, वैसे तो कामयाब रहा चांद का सफर, है अपनी अपनी फिक्र में हर कौम का बशर, है अपनी अपनी फिक्र में हर कौम का बशर, है अपनी अपनी फिक्र में हर कौम का बशर, मर्दाने हक परस्त का जाना हुआ कर, मर्दाने हक परस्त का जाना हुआ कर, अब्बास नामवर का आलम लेके जाएंगे, हम चांद पर हुसैन का कब लेके जाएंगे. In short, if and when we the believer go to moon, may we will take the alam of Abbas Namwar to the moon and we'll have Majalis of Imam Hussain Islam there. One important note is that the views and opinions expressed today by our respected leaders and speakers are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Imam Hussain committee and organization. Also, I'd like to thank the people who has donated in making this Hussain Day successful. In conclusion, let me welcome all of you, our special audience, Hussain Day committee members, and our honorable speakers. Together, with the help of God and the blessing of Ahlul Bayt, let us make Hussain Day 2013 yet another successful, promising, and everlasting event. Thank you and God bless you. Wassalam.
At this point, we're going to jump right into our program. And to do so, I'm going to invite Aram Ahmed to the podium, who will be introducing our very first speaker, Maulana Rizwan Rizvi.
Maulana Rizwan Rizvi received his degree in theology and philosophy from Jamatul Mustafa Al-Alamaya in Qum, Iran, and his master's equivalent, Shahadati Al-Alamaya, from Wafaq Al-Madras of Shia in Lahore, Pakistan. He continued to further his education in advanced level studies in both classical and colloquial Arabic from Damascus University. He now lectures at various Islamic centers across the United States and is a resident alim of Masjid al-Aqsa. Maulana Rizvi will discuss character development in light of Karbala. Please join me in welcoming Maulana Rizwan Rizvi. Salam.
Salawat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm hearing I have 15 minutes to tell the Arabic part of it. Start in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beneficent, the merciful. He says in Surah Al-A'd, verse number 17, كَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْحَقَّ وَالْبَاطِلَ فَأَمَّا الزَّبَدُ فَيَذْهَبُ جُفَاءً وَأَمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسَ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ كَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالَ. صدق الله العلي العظيم. The verse that I recited from chapter Ra'd, verse number 17, it says, when God sends down water from the sky and floods run through the valleys, certain quantities of foam rise on the surface of the flood water. To God, truth and falsehood are like these examples. The foam disappears, but what is profitable to the human being stays in the land. Thus does God coin the parable. Beautiful example and analogy is being presented over here. In this ayah, inshallah, we'll elaborate in the brief time that I have, discussing the concept or the topic of character development in the light of Karbala. We see that the life of Sayyid al-Shuhada is like that water which is being discussed in this ayah. Source of life, rescued the tree of Islam from drying up and dying. That's why the leader of the freedom, Sayyid al-Shuhada, has remained forever. Example is of the pure tree, like the pure word of haqq against batil, which gives fruits at every season. And thus a perfect example for character development for every person in the society until the day of judgment. In order to discuss this topic of character development in the light of Karbala, or in the light of the teaching of Imam Hussain, as you will see that it is more in the light of teaching of Imam Hussain than Karbala, but they're both the same thing. I wanted to discuss it from the aspect of some characters that came along while the way of Imam Hussain. And prior to that, I wanted to discuss the three individuals to whom Yazid had written a letter and asking Walid ibn Uqba to get their allegiance. And from there we'll start, inshallah, and if I have time towards the end, we'll discuss some of the ethical, moral, historical aspects of this character development that we can derive from Karbala. We see that first, when Yazid wrote this letter to Walid ibn Uqba seeking allegiance from these three people. First one is Imam Hussain, who knew, and we know how he dealt with it, how he came out with it. He said right away, La wallahi la u'tikum biyadi i'ta' al-dhalil wa la uqirru lakum iqrar al-habib. He said that I will not give hand to disgrace and will not be submissive to their rule like a slave. That was the reply that Imam gave. He said, Allah wa inna da'i ibn da'i qad tarakani bayna as-sillati wa dhilla hayhat min al-dhilla. That he has put me in a place where either I carry the weapons or I face humiliation. And lest I will ever face humiliation. Hayhat min al-dhilla. This was the reply of Imam Hussain. So living freely and saving oneself from humiliation is in a nutshell what Imam is telling us over here. Second, Imam demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice without a desire for war. That was another thing. That he wants to sacrifice, but there's no desire that exists as far as war is concerned. Second letter or second allegiance that was being sought was from Abdullah ibn Zubayr. who didn't pay allegiance and didn't accompany Imam either. So he went the other way. He didn't want to come along with Imam Hussain, nor did he want to pay allegiance to Yazid. Instead, he tried to protect himself inside the Kaaba, which we see that when Yazid went towards Makkah, or he sent the army towards Makkah, even when a person who runs away from Imam of his time to try and find security inside the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even Allah does not protect that individual. And so we see he prioritized political interest over Islamic purity. And so he saw the result of it. Third, Abdullah ibn Umar said to Imam, just do what everyone else is doing, pay allegiance, and it will be better for you and your family. So he prioritized political unity over Islamic purity. You see three different concepts or three different ways that these people had gone about. Some people even went further by saying to Imam, don't cause fitna in the society by what you're doing and do what everyone else is doing. This is where Imam reminded them of the verses of Quran, for example, فَلَا تُطِعِ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا, and like. We see that different characters also came along the way that Imam developed as he was embarking on this journey. Even those that came in complete contact or direct contact with Imam. And then later, even after the martyrdom of Imam, how if after effects of the Shahadat are still developing characters and shaping them up. We see the first characters in the form of Ubaidullah ibn Hurr, that a person who has camped outside of Kufa to show his neutral approach towards this conflict. And when Imam sent one of his companions, Hajjaj Masrur, he sent him towards him to go ahead and speak to him, to convince him to come and join the army. He refrained. His reply was the same, that I want to be neutral. Then Imam himself goes towards this individual. And then Imam invites him. And he says, I'm showing you the path of paradise. This was the reply that he gave back. He said that I don't want to side with Yazid, because if I do so, I will be sacrificing my hereafter. I don't want to side with you, because if I do so, I will be sacrificing my worldly life. So therefore I have taken this neutral approach of taking side of neither one of you. And I have camped outside of Kufa. This is where he said, but my heart is with you. And I'm willing to give everything that you need to go ahead and perform this jihad. Imam recited the ayat from Surah Kahf by saying, وَمَا كُنْتُ مُتَّخِذَ الْمُضِلِّينَ عَضُدًا. He said, I didn't want to be held by those who lead people astray. Here I'm trying to show you a path. How Imam is developing, how Imam is giving jihad and the sun and the direction to these characters that are coming along, and obviously to those people who are listening and to those people who come around across reading these individuals. Second is Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyadi. We see the character of Hurr. Everybody over here is aware of Hurr. First, went to stop Imam's path after Imam had given him and his horses water and had prayed behind Imam ﷺ as well. He stops Imam. Imam replied by saying, he said, oh Lord, may your mother sit in your grief. He couldn't reply by saying what? Oh Imam, if someone else had said the same thing, I would have given a reply, but I know you're son of Fatima. Therefore I cannot reply in the same fashion. And again, this is the character building. This is how a character is in the format or in the process of being built. How Imam ﷺ knows which part is fertile enough to take what Imam is saying. Imam is not going to say the same thing to other individuals. Imam looks at Hurr ibn Yazid and he says such a thing. Because he knows the land is fertile enough for it to have any effect on his heart. And so right away, Imam says, this job is 50%, rest is ours. Imam is only going to come and do the 50% job as far as bringing us out of this darkness. Remaining 50% is our work and hard work, how much we are willing to do so. So Imam wrote, and this is where we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib also, when he wrote two separate letters, one to Malik Ashtar, second to the people of Egypt. These both letters are there in Nahjul Balagha. Why is he addressing two? Malik Ashtar, who is his deputy over there, and the people of Egypt. He's saying only having a just leader is not enough. You also have to play your role as far as showing the willingness to go ahead and perform what this leader is asking you to do. Third, we see a person by the name Umar Islam. and we all know his character and the kirdar that he played in the whole event of Karbala. And when given a promise that if he achieves what he was sent to do to kill Imam Hussain, he would be the ruler of right, and he will be given this governance. This is where Imam knows that this individual will not have any effect. And when Imam says to him that forget the city of Ray or forget Ray, you will not even be able to taste the bread of that city. And so obviously, a person like him, the reply of her was that Imam, I cannot say the same thing you have said to me. But the person like Umar Asad says, oh, what? If there's no bread available, I'll eat something else over there. So in other words, mocking Imam of what Imam has said. This is where Imam says, قَدْ انْخَزَلَتْ عَطِيَّاتُكُمْ مِنَ الْحَرَامِ وَمُلِعَتْ بُطُونُكُمْ مِنَ الْحَرَامِ فَطُبِعَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ وَيْلَكُمْ أَلَا تُنْصِتُونَ أَلَا تَسْمَعُونَ He said, you are going against my commands. You're not paying attention to my words. You have the right to do so. Why? It's haq upon you that you do such a thing. Since you have been given haram gifts and your bellies are filled with haram food. Your hearts have been stamped. Woe unto you. Why don't you quiet down and why don't you listen to me? This is again a character that we see in Karbala. And lastly, we see another character, which is after the death of Imam Hussain. And this person probably has nothing to do with Islam either. There were many other individuals that came along the way, but obviously, because of the time, can't go into the details of it. But I thought this would be a better approach by giving examples of individuals to understand how Karbala and how Imam Hussain built and gave development to certain characters. And so we see over here, ambassador of Rome, who's sitting in the darbar of Yazid. And when he sees the head of Imam Hussain is brought and presented in the court of Yazid, he said, هَذَا رَأْسُ مَنْ? Whose head is this? Yazid first replies by saying, مَا لَكَ وَلِهَذَا الرَّأْسِ? What do you want to do with this head? What do you care? Do your thing, what you come here for. He replied by saying that when I go back to Rome, I have to explain everything. Whatever I've seen, what I have heard, I have to give account to every single detail. This is where Yazid said, هَذَا رَأْسُ Hussain ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the head of Hussain, son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Right away he asked, وَمَنْ أُمُّهُ? Who's his mother? He replied by saying, فَاطِمَةُ بِنْتُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. He's the son of Fatima, daughter of Rasulullah. قَالَ نَصْرَانِي أُفٍّ لَكَ وَلِدِينِكَ. Woe unto you and your religion. لِي دِينٌ أَحْسَنُ مِنْ دِينِكُمْ. I have a religion which is better than your religion. Your religion teaches you to kill the children of your prophet. He then said, I'm the descendant of Prophet Dawood. There are many generations gap between me and him. But people still respect me to the extent that they would take the dust from beneath my feet as blessings for themselves. This is the trust and this is the respect that they have for me. وَأَنْتُمْ تَقْتُلُونَ ابْنَ بِنْتِ نَبِيِّكُمْ وَمَا بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَ نَبِيِّكُمْ إِلَّا أُمٌّ وَاحِدَةٌ فَأَيِّ الدِّينِ دِينُكُمْ. That you go ahead and kill the son of your prophet's daughter? What kind of religion do you possess? Definitely my deen is better than yours. So here we see that Karbala is a complete institution. It covers every aspect of our life, which would be helpful in the development of this life. We see the correct aqaid and the belief are explained thoroughly in Karbala, in the form of the tawheed as far as our aqaid are concerned, the tawheed of our actions, the origination of human being, and the ma'ad, the qayamat, shafa'at, imamat, and antidote. All these things are discussed in as far as Karbala is concerned. It teaches us the lessons of ethics, moral freedom. It teaches us how to live a life, a free individual life, how to be free. Imam is also saying the same thing, that I have come to free this salat, which has become asir, which is captive. Salat has become captive. You think you're praying, but the salat is actually captive right now. This is what I have come to do. Teaches sacrifice, honoring mankind, tawakkul, reliance upon Allah, jihad with nafs, bravery, patience, steadfastness, ifah, hijab, modesty, and loyalty. All of them are being taught as far as the morality and the ethics are concerned from the character development in Karbala. It teaches us the lesson about the reality of life, concept of victory and defeat. What is the real victory? What is defeat? So apparently people were seeing that Imam Hussain and his companions have lost. But that is not what is the apparent victory or defeat in the definition is. You look at the effects of it, which is still long lasting, as you always hear, whenever the moon of Muharram rises. This is announcing the victory of Hussain, and it is announcing the defeat of Yazid. Life is the name of spending it based on doctrine and struggle. It says, Inna al-hayata aqidatun wa jihad. Choosing the right and the wrong path. Kufans chose the wrong path. Imam teaches them, no, choose the right path in your life. When Hazrat Abbas was given this mercy letter by Shimr to bring him and say that, because of the relation, I want to bring you out and I want to take you to security. He replied by saying, La hajata lana fi amanikum. Amanullahi khairum min amani ibn Sumayyah. We don't need this, security letter from you or mercy letter from you. The aman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough for us rather than the aman of the son of Sumayyah. Constant struggle in life. People are heedless until they're faced with problems. And that's what Imam was salam to go ahead and explain to this individual. To go ahead and show this, Imam was salam beautifully, eloquently explained it. He said, Inna nas abidud dunya wa dinun la'kun ala al-sinatihim yahutunahu ma darrat ma'ayishahum fa idha muhrisu bil bala qalla dayyanun. That indeed people are the slaves of this world. And religion is only, is something which is started utterance of their tongue. As soon as they're faced with some sort of problem and difficulties in their life, you will find very few to be on the path of deen and religion. The bell just rang and I didn't have much time to continue and finish my talk today, but we see one last thing, the spiritual development in the life, or in the life of Karbala, in the life of Imam Hussain. That Imam والسلام, for the love of God, and the remembrance of Allah, and the sacrifice, which are all important components as far as the development, human development is concerned. We look at the utmost level of rida and taslim, contentment and submission. When Imam ﷺ said, Taraktul khalqa turran fi hawaka wa aitamtul ayala likay araka. He said that I left the world, khalq, in desire for you, O Allah. Wa aitamtul ayala. I made my family orphan, likay araka, so that I may witness you. Wa akhir da'wana, alhamdulillah, rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Maulana Rizwan, for that very wonderful speech on character development through Karbala. As Maulana Rizwan mentioned, Karbala is the ideal and perfect example on how we should develop our character through the message of Imam Hussain. And he gave an example of how Imam Hussain affected many people through his sacrifice, including, I believe he mentioned, the king of Rome. Imam Hussain showed us that living freely and without humility and with religious purity is greater than any worldly power or compromise. Just as Karbala gave us insight on character development, it also gave us insight on the strength and importance of women to the message of Islam. I would like to now invite Umber Mohsin to the podium to introduce our next speaker, Professor Karen Ruffle.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dr. Karen Ruffle is Assistant Professor of Religion, History of Religion, and Women and Gender Studies at University of Toronto and specializes in South Asian Shiism. She has her Master's and PhD in Religious Studies with a specialization in Islamic Studies from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Additionally, she has Bachelor's in Religion from Middlebury College and is author of Gender, Sainthood and Everyday Practice in South Asian Shiism. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Karen Ruffle, who will today speak about the role of ladies in Islam, role of ladies in Karbala, from Lady Fatmatul Zahra to Lady Zainab Salawatullah alayh. Please, I welcome you, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'd especially like to thank Mr. Bakr Rizvi and Dr. Manzoor Rizvi for inviting me and offering me such kind hospitality today. Shi'ism has a deep tradition of women whose public lives were committed to the doctrine of justice, adalah, and social service to build a better society. The powerful model of the women of the Ahl Bayt as embodiments of Hussaini ethics, the doctrine of Hussainiyat, which in my research and based on my fieldwork, primarily in Hyderabad, in the Deccan, this ethic reflects the religious and social ethic of Imam Hussain and his family and their sacrifices at the Battle of Karbala. The women of the Ahl Bayt are embodiments of this Hussaini ethics, and they are models of imitable sainthood in the sense that we're able to cultivate the religious and socio-ethical ideals that they lived out in their lives. Their model compels women to actively contribute to society today. The socially sanctioned desire to emulate the women of the Prophet Muhammad's family, especially Bibi Fatima and Sayyida Zainab, fosters a dynamic ethos in which one is encouraged to cultivate an idealized self and participate in the betterment of society. In this presentation today, I take the example of two women of the Prophet Muhammad's household, his daughter, Hazrat Fatima Zahra, and his granddaughter, Sayyida Zainab. These two women are particularly revered by Shi'i men and women for their piety and dedication to their family and society, which is manifested primarily through their embodiment of this Hussaini ethics and imitable sainthood. In addition to this worldly sanctity, Hazrat Fatima is endowed with a special feminine form of transcendent sainthood. Bibi Fatima Zahra is revered as one of the most holy of Muslim women. She is known by her various alqab, Khair al-Nisa, the best of women, Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alamain, the mistress of the women of the two worlds. And Maryam al-Kubra, the greater Maryam, to name just a few epithets that indicate her lofty and transcendent status. The Shia believe that God entrusted Bibi Fatima's daughter, Sayyida Zainab, with the responsibility of being the messenger of martyrdom after the Battle of Karbala. Zainab's hagiographers portray her as a spiritual and socio-ethical exemplar whose bravery and willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of religion and justice are admired and emulated by both Shi'i men and women. Fatima and Zainab uphold the notion of justice, a central concept in Shi'i social and religious life. Their intense engagement with religious and social matters in the public sphere is significant, for neither Bibi Fatima nor Sayyidat Zainab were political quietists. Rather, they fought publicly and passionately for the integrity and rights of their family and faith. The women of the Prophet's family are embodiments of this Hussaini ethic and imitable sainthood, and their model, while exceptional, encourages imitation by both Muslim men and women. Rather than emphasizing the asceticism of celibacy, male hagiographers explicitly maintain the Shi'i female saints' gendered status. Male hagiographers emphasize the family roles and identities of Bibi Fatima, Zainab, Fatima Kubra, and Sakina. But this process does not necessarily reduce them down to mere relatives of the Prophet Muhammad and the Imams. Fatima Zahra is revered as the most holy of Muslim women, sinless, spiritually perfected, the lady of sorrows and patience. Fatima also possesses a form of initiatic knowledge, having received the Mus'haf Fatima, a heavenly text revealing all events in her descendants' future. Zainab is venerated as an imitable saint and socio-ethical exemplar whose bravery and willingness to sacrifice everything are admired by Shi'i men and women alike. Sakina and Fatima Kubra, daughters of Imam Hussain, were young girls at the Battle of Karbala, but made sacrifices to preserve both their family and their religion. Likewise, Hazrat Fatima Masume, the sister of the 8th Imam Raza, is revered as a woman of great learning and piety. And hundreds of thousands of devotees go on ziyarat each year to her lavish gold-domed shrine and home in Iran. Like their male relations, the women of the Ahl Bayt occupy a distinctive role as saints and socio-ethical exemplars in the spiritual devotional life of Shi'i Muslims. They are respected and portrayed in various devotional genres as females, feminine, pious, learned, and brave figures. Never are the women of Ahl Bayt relegated to the appendix of a devotional text or Karbala narrative, nor do they undergo a transvestic inversion that transforms them into quasi-men. Females and the feminine are an integral aspect of Shi'ism. In fact, Shi'i devotional tradition amplifies the various models of piety and exemplary socio-ethical behavior provided by the women of the Ahl Bayt, particularly Bibi Fatima and Sayyida Zainab, who are portrayed as models. These women are portrayed as models of idealized womanhood. Why are stories about the women of the Ahl Bayt, the women of the Prophet's family, so frequently invoked in the ritual performance of the Majlis? And why are feminine voices and emotions, particularly those of Sakina and Sayyida Zainab, so effectively engaged in Karbala devotional literature? In what follows, I would like to focus on the ways in which Bibi Fatima and Sayyida Zainab have been portrayed in Indo-Persian devotional literature and ritual. I'd like to focus on two different aspects of devotional creativity. The first is the memorializing mission God entrusted to Sayyida Zainab as the messenger of martyrdom, exemplified by the use of her voice and emotion in Karbala literature, and with Bibi Fatima, the rich religious material tradition that makes her present even in her absence, her physical absence. Fatima's presence is eternal. She witnesses our tears and loyalty, and she will intercede on our behalf, on behalf of the Mahaban and Ahl Bayt at the Day of Judgment. At the most basic level, the women of the Ahl Bayt are such enduring models because they survived the Battle of Karbala and spent the remainder of their lives spreading the message and keeping alive the memory of Imam Hussein's martyrdom. These women sacrificed, suffered, survived, and remained intensely dedicated to the preservation of Islam and to demanding justice for the atrocities committed against their families. This justice is meted out in the Shi'i collective memory performed in the Majlis and documented in martyrdom narratives, Maqtal, and poetry, Marsiya, Salam, Noha, and materialized in sacred architecture, the imambaras, ashukhanas, bardas, and the objects that they contain, alams, taziyas, and so on. Shamsul Hassan Shamsi extols Zainab as, and I quote, a second to Hussein, keeping alive the revolutionary memory of her brother, and keeping aloft the banner of Islamic values, and keeping alight the torch of the noble ideals lighted by her martyred brother. Shamsi's reference to Zainab as a second Hussein is highlighted for drawing attention to her role as the messenger of martyrdom, which is fundamentally a public and political act that dramatizes the degradation of the Muslim community less than 50 years after the Prophet Muhammad's death. Fatima's daughter Zainab was, like her mother, committed to a life of public service as the messenger of her brother's martyrdom. Although Zainab is not counted as one of the Charda Masmin, the Prophet Muhammad's closeness to his granddaughter and his role in choosing her name, which means a beautiful possession or adornment of her father, indicates her significant role as a member of the Ahl Bayt. According to Shi'i tradition, the Prophet Muhammad and I quote, left clear instructions that Janabe Zainab should always be respected because he knew what services she was going to render to Islam. Zainab is revered as the messenger of martyrdom, and she and her brother were obligated, they were given a divine trust to fulfill the predestined events of Karbala and its aftermath. Each was given a God-given duty. Zainab's responsibility was to keep alive the memory of her brother's sacrifice, of her family's sacrifice, and in doing that, to preserve her tradition, her faith. Zainab was the living witness to Imam Hussein's martyrdom, and she was given this divinely ordained responsibility to ensure that the Muslim community never forget what happened at Karbala. Zainab's public mission, and I emphasize her public mission, reflects the degradation of the Muslim community, and hagiographical accounts detail the sufferings that she and her other female relatives endured at Yazid's court in Damascus. And these sufferings instilled feelings of shame and anger in the Majlis, of a desire to remember, to have justice, to seek revenge in that act of never forgetting. These narratives provoke feelings of indignation in devotees' hearts. This is an effective strategy of narrative engagement that plays on the desires to uphold justice and protect the vulnerable. In the aftermath of Karbala, Zainab, however, is the protector and the preserver of her family's memory and their faith. She spent the rest of her life keeping this memory alive, and I'd like to read a translation of an Urdu Noha by a poet. His takhallus is Bakr. Weeping, Zainab cried out, "The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. The flame of the lamp of Medina has been extinguished. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead." That pious attendant of the Prophet's tomb, who was the ornament of Medina, his flame was extinguished in the dust. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. In the afternoon, the house was cleared. By the time of Asr, the king's throat was cut. Upon killing the king, the tents were set ablaze. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. Alas, that visage of Mustafa, the king, has relinquished his life. On the battlefield, that youthful king has died. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. The powerless ones are in fetters. All of the ladies have become prisoners. The house of Mustafa has become shackled. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. The widows were mounted on camels. The hands of that one struck ill were bound to the reins, driven into alien lands. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. By the arrow that pierced and silenced that throat, the bitterly sobbing infant died. By the fire of tyranny, the cradle was set ablaze. The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead. Bakr laments until the day of the resurrection, and there was a tumult in Mustafa's grave. When weeping, Zainab said, "The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead." This Noha powerfully appropriates Zainab's voice, testifying to Muslims of what has happened to the progeny of the Prophet Muhammad and the people most beloved by God at the Battle of Karbala. The refrain, "The women's quarters are plundered, Hussein is dead," elevates the pathos of the Majlis participants, increasing the intensity with which the mourners strike their hands on their chests while performing matam and shedding tears of grief. The 20th century Iranian intellectual Ali Shariati asserted that Imam Hussein was predestined to die a martyr so that the women of the Ahl Bayt could serve as socio-ethical exemplars for future generations of Muslim women. According to, and I quote, Shariati, "The patriarchal system which rules history, women had to either A, choose bondage in being toys of the harems, or B, if they were to remain liberated, they must become the leaders of the caravan of the captives and survivors of the martyrs.
Subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah.
The women of the Ahl Bayt were captured by Yazid's army and they were brought to his court in Damascus. But hagiographical narratives counter this captivity narrative with accounts of their defiance. Shariati continues, and I quote again, "Once again, from this little house which is greater than all of history, a man emerges, angry, determined. But no! Walking side by side him, a woman has also emerged from Fatima's house, step by step with him. She has taken half of the heavy mission of her brother upon her own shoulders. The second mission is that of the message. It is to deliver the message of martyrdom to the ear of the world, is to be a tongue which speaks. This message is upon the delicate shoulders of a woman, Zainab, a woman who is such that alongside her, manliness has learned manliness. And Zainab's mission is more difficult, more grave even, than the mission of her brother. Shariati elevated Zainab's role as the messenger of martyrdom to virtually transcend that of the bodily sacrifice of her brother Hussein. Shariati juxtaposed the delicate shoulders of Zainab with the difficulty, even heaviness of her mission. Despite the fact that Zainab is a woman, her strength and bravery are a lesson to men. Zainab is not transformed into a woman with manly strength. Bravery and strength are qualities that we often think of as masculine, but Zainab, a woman, she is the possessor of these powerful traits. As we can see with Zainab's memorializing mission, her voice and emotion play a central role in shaping Shi'i collective memory of the Battle of Karbala. Bibi Fatima also has a centrally important role in shaping Shi'i community of remembrance devoted to her family and faith. In what follows, I will focus on two aspects of how devotion to Bibi Fatima structures Shi'i ritual and belief in South Asia. And basically what I'm describing is based on my fieldwork in Hyderabad. First, I would like to describe the vibrant material culture that structures ritual devotional practice in Hyderabad, and then I will focus on how Bibi Fatima's intercessory powers and her miraculous presence in the Majlis, and in times when we need her presence, when we need her guidance and help, how that presence and absence temporally fuses past, present, and future. I start with a description of the julus that takes place in the old city of Hyderabad on the 10th of Muharram. When the sun rises over the old city on Ashura, thousands of men gather at the Bargai Abbas, which is an important Ashur Khana dedicated to Hazrat Abbas in the old city, where they perform bloody matam with blades, knives, and flails. The men strip off their shirts and beat their chests, backs, and heads to the nohas that are recited by the noha khans down in the courtyard alongside the matamdars. This public act of self-mortification is a powerful masculine affirmation of the Shia's willingness to sacrifice their lives for religion and Imam Hussein's family. Along the rooftop, women gather to watch this act of faith. As the hours pass, the blood flows from the devotees' bodies, which is mixed with the heady floral scent of rose water that is sprayed on the men's bodies by members of the Muharram associations. And at the end, men perform kamazani. They strike the top of the head here with knives, and this causes even more blood to flow. And it seems as though, well, this might be the most important moment, the climax of the day, but it's not. When Imam Hussein was killed on the afternoon of Ashura, these acts of matam are performed, and also the community goes out and again publicly displays and shows their faith by going on julus through all of the neighborhoods of the old city. And in Hyderabad, so this remembrance of Imam Hussain is intricately integrated with remembrance of his mother, Bibi Fatima. From late morning through the afternoon, a massive procession, a julus of men and boys carrying alams and performing matam makes its way through the narrow lanes of the old city. Tens of thousands of people line the streets to watch the black-clad mourners pass by as they whip their backs with flails and chains. Most of the observers are Shia. However, there are also, it is a mixed community. There are Sunnis, Hindus, Christians, and then sometimes hapless foreign tourist who wanders by and wonders what is going on. But people come primarily to see the Bibi Ka Alam and to be able to participate and receive a bit of Bibi Fatima's intercessory power. The procession of the Bibi Ka Alam is the most important event in the Hyderabadi Muharram cycle. When the new moon is sighted on the 1st, the Bibi Ka Alam is installed in Alada Bibi, one of Hyderabad's most popular Ashur Khanas, located in the Dabirpura locality in the old city. The Bibi Ka Alam is a large golden battle standard containing a wooden piece of the platform upon which Bibi Fatima received her funerary bath. This relic was long held in Karbala, although during the Qutb Shahi period, it found its way to Golconda, where it was bestowed upon the king Abdullah Qutb Shah. As a sign of her devotion to Bibi Fatima, Hayat Bakshi Begum, who's popularly known in Hyderabad as Ma Sahaba, who is also the mother of Abdullah Qutb Shah, commissioned the installation of this special alam. During the reign of the Asif Jah, the 7th Asif Jahi king, Mir Osman Ali Khan, the Bibi Ka Alam was installed in its present location at the Bibi Ka Alaba Ashur Khana, which was refurbished and recommissioned in the 1940s. During the first 10 days of Muharram, thousands of devotees come to Bibi Ka Alaba in order to pay their respects to Bibi Fatima, to give offerings to the Alam, and to seek Bibi Fatima's intercession. On Ashura, the Bibi Ka Alam is taken out in procession, which is placed on top of an elephant. From Dabirpura to Yakutpura, through other localities to the Charminar, and ultimately to Dar Shifa, the Alam slowly makes its way to the banks of the Musi River. The Julus concludes at the Nile pool, where the Alams and other ritual objects are immersed in the river's water in order to cool the potent Shakti or power, and particularly feminine power, that radiates. The symbolic immersion, the Bibi Ka Alam, the symbolic immersion of the Bibi Ka Alam in the Musi River is a powerful symbolic act. For rivers in South Asian religions are venerated as potent symbols also of feminine power. Immersing the Alam in the Musi River cools the Alam, cools the power. It reappropriates this power, which sustains and protects Bibi Fatima's devotees for another year. The Bibi Ka Alam is not the only Fatima or relic associated with Bibi Fatima in Hyderabad. Although the Nizams of the Asif Jahi dynasty were Sunni Muslims, they were great patrons of Shi'i religious institutions, poets, and were faithful participants in the Majlis-e-Azam. The last Nizam, Mir Osman Ali Khan, was deeply devoted to the Ahl Bayt. And sometimes I kind of forget that actually he wasn't Shia. So he sponsored, so in addition to Bibi Ka Alaba, he also sponsored the building and renovation, restoration of a number of Ashur Khanas throughout the old city of Hyderabad. When his mother, Zahra Begum, died, the Nizam commissioned the construction of Azad-Khana-e-Zahra in 1941. This Ashur Khana is on the banks of the Musi River. And it's also recently undergone a really beautiful restoration. The main alam that the Azakhana Zahra had is dedicated to Bibi Fatima. And this, again, it's really interesting because this Fatima alam is unlike any other in Hyderabad. It is composed of 5 metals, so it's the Panchzat: gold, silver, copper, bronze, and lead. This alam traditionally has remained installed throughout the year so that people can come and partake of Bibi Fatima's intercession at any time. Mir Osman Ali Khan's devotion to Bibi Fatima extended beyond the Bibi Kalaba, beyond Azakhana Zahra, a monument to his biological and spiritual mothers. Soon after construction was completed on the Azakhana, he commissioned the construction of a complex of 12 ashrakhanas known as Khilwat Mahal, located to the west of Charminar and adjacent to the Chamahalla Palace. The Khilwat ashrakhanas are closed to the public, and the wealth of relics, artwork, and other sacred objects contained in this complex remain virtually unknown and undocumented. Members of the Ahl Bayt often appear to Shia in dreams and apparitions, providing solace, advice, and providing information about the future. And I myself have had an experience during a very difficult time in my life, this was about 1.5 years ago, in which I saw a woman approaching me with a bright, shining face, and she smiled at me and was approaching. And this was, well, I have to be honest, it was terrifying, because Bibi Fatima came to me in a dream as I was having this very difficult time in my life, and she, in a sense, her presence provided me with the answers that I needed. And so I hear, when people tell these experiences that they've had, I take it very seriously, and I think it's not only her presence in the Majlis that matters so much, but it's also in these times of difficulty, despite her own sufferings, her own difficulty. She is endless in her generosity. She's always there. So I think at this point, I have much more to say. These are figures that I hold very close in my heart, and I think it's incredibly important for us to think about, oftentimes, when scholars write about the women of the Ahl Bayt, these women are portrayed as passive victims. And I think we miss the meaning of these women when we only think of them as passive victims, because women like Bibi Fatima and Sayyida Zainab were really strong and tough and brave and embodied their faith. And I think it's when we keep that in mind, and that the model that they present compels, I think provides such a valuable and important model for women to be involved in the public sphere, in social justice, in the betterment of society, of the family, of your faith, of yourself. And I think with that, I will conclude, and I'd like to thank you all again.
Thank you very much to Professor Russell for that very excellent speech on the role of women in Karbala and the benefits. It is narrated that the Imams very frequently, when they wanted to remember Imam Hussain, would request their students or their friends to recite poetry in remembrance of the Imam. Keeping with this practice, I would now like to invite Zain Rizvi to the podium for the recitation of
It is said that the measure of a man's worth is in his struggle. It is said that the measure of a man's worth is in his struggle, what he strives for, what he lives and dies for, what seizes his conscience and captures his core. It is said that the worth of a man is in the breadth of his vision, his undying loyalty to his dreams, a sort of spiritual precision, completed by the mind and the sort of men that pass in time, and time fails to find. It is said that the measure of a man's worth is even more. There he was. There he was, the leader of all who led, the teacher of all who read, the father of all who bred, the speaker of all who said, the teardropper of all who shed. There he was, lying there in more than one piece. But the Lord said, with every difficulty there is relief. Watch as the banner of truth is heralded. Watch as the banner of truth is heralded, planted amid coarse sand, tinted with his blood and tears, a testimony to all sacrifices grand. Let time listen. Let time listen as the banner still flutters in the air. Hussain, the banner says. Hussain, falsehood has vanished, and the truth is still here. Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to invite Arshad Hussain to the podium, who will be formally introducing our next speaker, Professor Akbar Haider.
Dr. Haider. Dr. Haider is the Associate Director and Associate Professor of Asian Studies, Islamic Studies at the University of Texas in Austin. Dr. Haider received his Bachelor's of Political Science from Texas A&M University and his PhD in Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations from Harvard University. Dr. Haider's research interests lie in South Asian aesthetics, particularly those related to Urdu literature and mystical Muslim traditions. Dr. Haider's author also, his book is titled Reliving Karbala, Martyrdom in South Asian Memory. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Haider, who will be speaking about seeking sustenance from Karbala aesthetics and creativity in South Asian context.
To continue with the theme of Hyderabad, Sayyid Shahidi, one of the great luminaries from the city of Hyderabad, says, Zikr Gham Hussain se महफिल सजी रही, गुल हो गया चिराग मगर रोशनी नहीं. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm honored to be in the presence of great scholars and elders. So again, thank you. 7 centuries had lapsed since Jesus raised the clarion call for a revolution in Jerusalem. 61 years had passed since the Prophet of Islam moved from Makkah to Medina. On the banks of the river Euphrates, on a spot of land that would become the historic Karbala, a spectacularly united band of the followers of Muhammad confronted the overwhelming forces of the empire of the time. The band was led by none other than the only surviving grandson of Muhammad, Hussain. Hussain was raised in a house that was conscious and conscientious, both politically and morally. His grandfather spoke up against the demagogues who exploited the vulnerable. His father Ali had gallantly defended the weak, the marginalized. His mother Fatima had been a stalwart champion of justice. His brother suffered from propagating a stance that challenged the assumption of authority through brute force. It was in this spirit of family tradition that Hussain was able to galvanize an impressively strong-willed, albeit numerically small, following. To these followers, Hussain was the wisest guide, both in this world and towards the hereafter. He was the Imam of the time. In the face of the Umayyad Empire's army that had massed to confront him, Hussain, in no uncertain terms, relayed to his followers that they were free to leave him. Not a single soul did. Islamic history would have unfolded in a different way if his grandfather or his father had such a resolute following. From the perspective of the Imam Hussain, the battle lines had been drawn over the issue of authority. Authority both worldly and spiritual. The Imam was clear that he would not submit to Yazid, a man who had risen to the throne in Damascus through nepotism and wiliness. The Imam's acceptance of Yazid's authority would signal a compromise of the principles of integrity that were at the heart of the faith. For Yazid's side, it was crucial to stop Hussain from professing this message. Also, Hussain was yet another target for those who had lost their privileged ranks in the economy of Arabia with the advent of Islam. The forces of Yazid pursued a battle. They suspended humanity. The Imam Hussain and his followers fought back. In a single day, we are told, 18 members of the Prophet's family, along with a few dozen followers, were killed. To the followers who survived this day, Hussain and his band became the martyrs, those who stand witness to God's justice against the forces of tyranny. This event has had a long-lasting effect, political and spiritual. The banks of the Euphrates launched a movement whose resonance would be felt thousands of miles away in the centuries to come. As the single most significant historic event in the lives of millions, Karbala has left an indelible symbolic mark on devotional practices, on the transmissions of Islamic history, and on subsequent developments in aesthetics, mysticism, and reform. Just as Muslims see their Prophet as Uswa Hasana, the beautiful model of conduct, for many, Hussain ibn Ali also looms large on the horizon as Sayyid al-Shuhada, the leader of martyrs. South Asia's most prominent Muslim reformer poet, Muhammad Iqbal, who died in 1938, treats the Imam Hussain as the foundation of Islam, as a core chapter of Islam's revealed text. Bahre haq dar khak o khoon ghaltida ast, bas binaye la ilah gardida ast. For the sake of truth, he write in dust and blood. Thus did he become the foundation of La Ilaha, the creed of unity. Iqbal, a devout student of Islamic mystical traditions, especially those fashioned by Jalaluddin Rumi, builds his interpretation of Karbala on the most acclaimed Persian verses written in 13th century India. And these verses have already been cited, verses of Khaja Moinuddin Chishti, Shahast Hussain, Badshahast Hussain, Dinast Hussain, Din Panast Hussain, Sardad Nada Dast Dast Yazid, Akka ke bina la ilah Ast Hussain. The truth is that the foundation of faith is Hussain. Apart from its significance within the context of Muslim devotion, the event of Karbala continues to appeal to those from traditions that do not identify per se with the religion of Islam. As Josh Malihabadi, another prominent poet from the South Asian subcontinent, expresses, इंसान को बेदार तो लेने दो, हर कौम पुकारेगी हमारे हैं हुसैन. Allow the humans to awaken, all communities will then cry out, Hussain is ours. What is important to mention here is that even within Muslim devotional world, the Imam's struggle rises above any parochial cause tied exclusively to a religious or ethnic community. One of the most prominent scholars of Islam in South Asia, Ali Naqi Naqvi, or Naqan Saab, in his writings on Karbala, makes it clear that Hussain fought for principles that are deeply rooted in shared human values. In fact, according to Naqan Saab, the founder of Hussain Day, and Mr. Naqvi reminded me of that today, the Imam struggle was concerned most with unmasking hypocrisy that has enveloped politics of the Muslim world. The thirst that Hussain and his followers endured for 3 days is a thirst that becomes a metaphor for minoritarian struggles for justice. Just as every step in the cause of justice should remind us that there is yet another step, the thirst of Hussain and the thirst of his devotees to walk in his footsteps shall continue till the end of time. The great 19th century elegy writer Mirza Dabir writes, "Kiski zaban se pyas ne pai hai abru, kis tashna lab ke hisse mein aayi hai abru, iman kiski khaak pe लाई hai abru, आंसू की किसके गम ने बढ़ाई है आबरू, किस प्यासे के फलक में हमें शोरो शैन है, पूछा जो नाम प्यास पुकारी हुसैन है." Whose tongue is it from which thirst has gained its honor? Who is that parched one who has inherited honor? Whose dust is it that confers rank on honor? Whose sorrow is it that heightens a teardrop's honor? Who is that thirsty one, the one whose affliction causes us to grieve? When I asked for his name, thirst proclaimed, it is Hussain. And what becomes very interesting here is this theme of thirst and how it fashions this amazing creativity in multiple ways within the tradition of devotion. So, for example, in aesthetics, in Jamaliyat, we have a principle of mazmoon afrini, which is elaborating on particular topics so as to make them beautiful with each elaboration. And we have an example from some of the great devotional poets of 19th and early 20th century. We have Mirza Dabir writing, Peshkash Lashe Asghar Hi Bhala Laye Hussain, Peshkash Lashe Asghar Hi Bhala Laye Hussain, Haath Khali Tere Darbar Mein Kya Hai Hussain. This is Imam Hussain speaking to God with his young son in his embrace. And Miranis responds, Koi hadiya तेरे लायक नहीं पाता है हुसैन, कोई हदिया तेरे लायक नहीं पाता है हुसैन, हाथ खाली तेरे दरबार में आता है हुसैन. One of the descendants of Miranis, the great poet from Lucknow, Pyare Sahab Rashid, keeping up with this theme, writes, Asghar कलेजा थाम के रोती है फौज शाम, असगर कलेजा थाम के रोती है फौज शाम, तुम तीर खा के आए हो या तीर मार के. Again, प्यारे साहब रशीद, कहते कहते कुछ जबाने बेजबानी रह गई, तीर खा के सो गए, असगर कहानी रह गई. Thirst becomes a trope, a metaphor for desiring that which is essential, that which is sustenance. Thirst becomes a synonym for anticipation. As Parveen Shakir's poetry shows, पहरों की तिश्नगी में भी साबित कदम रहूं, पहरों की तिश्नगी में भी साबित कदम रहूं, दश्ते बला में रूह मुझे करबलाई दे. May I remain steadfast in the thirst of many hours. May the soul grant me the strength of Karbala in the desert of my own afflictions. Karbala, within the literary traditions I discuss, leaves thirst as its most important legacy, Piyas al-Atash. This is a thirst for justice, a thirst for accountability, a thirst of those who have been deprived of the resources that God has granted them. In deference to this thirst, Ali Sadar Jafri composes in a metrical pattern that had featured prominently in the compositions of the Arabic battle songs, the Rajas, the beat of this being in the syllable pattern, long, long, short, long. So here he goes. Al-Atash ki hai sada, jaise rajas ka zamzama, फिर रेगे सहरा पर रवान है अहले दिल का कारवां, नहरे फरात आतिश बजा, रावियो गंगा हो चुका, कोई यजीदे वक्त हो या शिम्र हो या हुरमला, उसको खबर हो या ना हो, रोजे हिसाब आने को है, नजदीक है रोजे जजा, ए करबला, ए करबला। गूंगी नहीं है ये जमीन, गूंगा नहीं ये आसमां, गूंगे नहीं हरफो बयां, गूंगी अगर है मसलहत, जख्मों को मिलती है ज़बां, वो खून जो नक्शे पाक था, ताबिंदा है पाइंदा है, सदियों की सफा की सही, इंसान अब भी जिंदा है एजाज़े फुगां, हर जर्रे पामाल में दिल के धड़कने की सदा, ए करबला, ए करबला। Sardar Jafri belonged to a literary movement unambiguously informed by class consciousness. It was a movement that was founded on the concerns of writers like Munshi Premchand. Literature had become the providence of the elite, those who disproportionately controlled the cultural capital. Premchand in the 1920s and 30s was the most formidable voice in Hindi-Urdu prose. Apart from drawing attention to the struggles of the Indian villages that had been conveniently wished away by the literary establishment of the time, Premchand also engages a central fallacy that continues to shape the moral sensibilities of many of us, what we call the bandwagon fallacy. A proposition is true because it has numbers on its side. Such propositions have long reigned oppressively over those calling out for a change. They have muzzled minorities within a tradition simply by reminding them that they are in a minority. Inspired by a centuries-long story common in many parts of the subcontinent, Premchand crafts a play that is anchored in the minoritarian sensibility that survives Karbala. Sahas Rai, a Hindu merchant from India, lives with his 7 brothers in an Arabian village when Yazid accedes to the throne. Morally disturbed that Yazid had usurped Hussein's authority, Sahas Rai and his band set out to assist the Imam. They arrive in Karbala, pay tribute to the Imam, and take up arms against Yazid's army. First, they protect the Imam and his companions from their enemies' arrows while the Imam is engaged in prayers. The Imam, in return, blesses these Hindus for protecting him and his followers. The Imam's pluralism is evident in every section of the play. After the Imam finishes his prayers, he addresses Sahas Rai, according to Premchand. O truth worshippers, we salute you. Although you are not a believer in Islam, a religion of truth worshipping followers, willing to die for justice, understanding worldly life to be insignificant, it is certainly a true and righteous religion to which you belong. Although with the light of Islam, I feel your religion can also shine. I should say along with the line of Islam, excuse me. Your religion shall also shine. In spite of the Imam's insistence that Sahas Rai is a guest and he should refrain from any act that would endanger his life, the Hindu merchant and his brothers are adamant that the battle of the Imam is a battle for the cause of justice. Sahasrai and his brothers are martyred before the Imam. The Imam takes the lead in their funeral prayers and speaks in laudatory tones of Hindus, of those who are determined to vindicate the cause of truth and justice. The Imam, along with his younger brother Abbas, celebrates the inclusion of these Hindus in his cause by transforming them into ideal Muslims without effacing their Hindu identity. Premchand fosters a sensitivity that accommodates the confluence of religions. The Hindu brothers do not perform the ritual prayers with the Imam's band, but they nevertheless ensure the safety of this group while it is praying. The Imam himself oversees the rites of cremation, rites not necessarily endorsed by scriptural Islam. The rigidly binary modeling of communalism is unsettled in the same vein as it had been in much of the Persian Indic poetry. After all, Premchand was a devotee of Ghalib, the greatest of 19th century Indian poets, the unsurpassed destroyer of binaries. Wafadari basharte ustawari asle iman hai, mare butkhane mein to Kaabe mein gaado barhaman ko. Fidelity with the strength of determination is the core of faith. If the Brahman dies in the house of idols, bury him in the Kaaba, says Ghalib. Hussein's battle in Karbala thus had an ethically inspirational value for this Hindu artist who utilized it aesthetically for the enhancement of a more unified Indian national community, while the larger subcontinental community was racked by religious tensions. And for those of you who are interested, Premchand wrote this play right around the time when a very sort of mischievous person from Lahore had written one of the biographies of the Prophet called the Rangila Rasul. So Premchand's Karbala was very much in response to this anti-Islam venom that was coming out of parts of the subcontinent. Premchand's imaginary community was given further impetus by the intertwined discourses of suffering and sacrifice that featured prominently in the words and actions of Mohandas Gandhi, the illustrious soldier of India's anti-colonial movement. To Gandhi, the ideal of Karbala was readily suitable for a broader vision of a just struggle, a struggle that did not demote one side just because it lacked support in numbers. As the prominent historian Mushirul Hassan points out, the Karbala paradigm itself communicated profound existential truths not only to the Shias but also to the Sunnis and Hindus. Gandhi drew from Karbala and invoked this event when he embarked on his first salt march. Like Imam Hussein's band in Karbala, his march had approximately 72 people in it. The historical progress of Islam, according to Gandhi, is not the legacy of the Muslim sword, but a result of the sacrifices of saints like Imam Hussain. To Gandhi's friend and critic, the preeminent Bengali poet, the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, Imam Hussein's sacrifice is indicative of the attainment of spiritual liberation. When the relationship between the material world and the world of love is terminated, says Tagore, then spirituality must gain ascendancy through sacrifice. Thus, for Tagore, the material world is the world of Yazid, whereas spiritual salvation lies with Hussein. Lest we think of Karbala as a hyper-masculine, Hussein-centric event, and as Karen has shown so beautifully, we must remind ourselves that within this creative tradition, the objectives of Hussein and his family would not have circulated as effectively as they did had it not been for the sister of the Imam, the older daughter of Fatima and Ali, Sayyida Zainab. As Iftikhar Arif points out, फातिमा की बेटी ने बाप की शुजाअत को सब्र से बदल डाला. Fatima's daughter transformed her father's courage through resilience, repaid her brother's friendship in what a splendid manner. Zainab is the one who has the transformative role in Karbala, the courage and eloquence so closely associated with her father and mother. She gives them a new meaning through her own endurance. She leads Islam on a new path by accomplishing a non-violent victory in the centers of the Umayyad power, the cities of Kufa and Damascus. Sayyida Zainab's struggle begins where Hussein's ends, during the dark night after the massacre at Karbala. The day belonged to the Imam, the night to his sister. For Parveen Shakir, one of Pakistan's finest feminist voices, Sayyida Zainab's fight for the cause of justice should also be seen as a paradigm for countless women who combat oppression in their family life and as professionals. Parveen Shakir speaks in the voice of Sayyida Zainab as a minority who has hardly benefited at the hands of the majority. From the tent of innocence, as soon as I proceeded towards the city of justice, from their ambush, my killers also emerged. In the Kufa of love, my helplessness, covering the face with its hair, folding its hands, bowing its head, uttering only one name on its lips, O forgiving and merciful one, O forgiving and merciful one. The markets and palaces of Kufa were the first ones through which Sayyida Zainab passed after her brother's martyrdom. Kufa was the capital of Ali and the city towards which Hussain was moving when stopped in Karbala. Zainab had to make the painful message through the city before she arrived in Damascus, Yazid's capital. Parveen Shakir's poem is written in the first-person mode with no mention of the name Zainab. It is as though the poet herself is retracing her steps in history and reading her own struggle in that of Hussein's sister. Shakir is fully aware of sentiments that privilege Zainab's swordless fight over the battles with swords. As Wahid Akhtar, a person I had the honor of interacting with, writes, the tongue of Zainab accomplished a greater task than the swords of Hussain and Abbas. The volumes are two, but the style of writing and the substance of what is written is one. In addition to pursuing a pluralistic interpretation of Karbala, writers like Shakir, Premchand, Tagore are also impressed with an ethical tradition that constitutes the elegy Marsiya tradition that springs from Lucknow. So, one of the fascinating things that happens is, I don't know how many of you are on Facebook, but in the past Muharram, we keep hearing, Gandhi said this about Imam Hussain, Nehru said this about Imam Hussain. So the question is, where do they derive their information from? And very few people know that the person or the persons they keep invoking are the great Miranis and Mirza David. So what is fascinating is how this message of reform is actually very much rooted within the Shi'i devotional tradition. Because what we tend to do is sort of separate the two traditions and speak of the devotional tradition as being a tradition of Zari, of Buka. And we do not see that this is a tradition that has also fostered a particular type of ethical landscape. And this is the time period when, at least in many parts of the subcontinent, we recite the Marsiya, Khane mein tala tumhe ke hindati hai. And one of the most fascinating things about this Marsiya is what it says about the ethics towards prisoners, those who have been locked up without due process. And this is what the Marsiya world addresses. Not only was Karbala couched in a pluralistic language, but the modes in which it was commemorated were themselves inclusive. Sunnis and Hindus constructed the taziyas of Lucknow and Mahmudabad. Elderly women took charge of raising the devotional banners in neighborhood imambaras and ashurkhanas. Young children, Hindu and Muslim, wore shackles that bound them in solidarity to the shackled survivors of Karbala. The performative traditions of Mehndi marvelously reflected how a grand struggle became personal and intimate. The Julus processions of barefoot and bareheaded devotees of the Imam, be it Hindu, Shia or Sunni, have been a testimony to Karbala's redemptive power across a religious spectrum. Consequently, and unfortunately, and again if you have been watching the news you know this, consequently and unfortunately, these collective exercises in devotion have precipitated the anguish of those who wish to safeguard rigid communal divides. So there is no accident that during Ashura, we are sort of holding our breath and praying we do not hear bad news from Lucknow, Lahore, Karachi, Baghdad. And this is not bad news that is just recent. This is the bad news that goes back to the time of Yazid's father, Muawiyah, when the family of Ali and when the companions of Ali were publicly cursed from the pulpits. And sort of the consensus of the scholars, those who are writing the history of Karbala, is that when the Imam asks the Umayyad forces, "What have I done? Why are you punishing me for this? What are you punishing me for?" And the response is that we are avenging the blood of those who had been killed at the hands of your father. It's very clear that this animosity is not an animosity that is produced on the banks of the Euphrates. This is an age-old animosity that had followed the Prophet from Makkah to Medina, that had followed the Prophet's grandson from Medina to Karbala. While we proudly remember that Gandhi bowed to the martyrs of Karbala, we are prone to forget that Gandhi's access to this event was through a cosmopolitan commemorative process that allowed individuals to pay tribute to the Imam on their own linguistic, ritualistic, and referential terms. And that's the reason, actually, I did not translate a lot of poetry from Urdu into English, because I feel that, these generations who are growing up, they need to learn Urdu, because there is something of the culture that is present within these traditions that is simply lost in translation. So to assume that we can translate everything into English in a seamless way, that itself would be very misleading in a gathering like this. George Malihabadi could see the resonances of Karbala when Gandhi was murdered in 1948. 2 decades later, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in America awakened a Karbala-inspired awe in Makhdoom Muhyiddin, a communist poet from Hyderabad. Ye qatl, qatl Masiha, ye qatl, qatl Hussain. And Makhdoom concludes actually with a lovely verse from the great Persian poet Hafiz. I hope I can remember this correctly. Makhdoom says, Kamina sharte wafa, tarke sarbubat Hafiz, baru, guzare tu, inkar, garnami ayat. The least condition of fidelity is to give up your head, Hafiz. Be gone from here. Get out of here if you cannot meet this very small stipulation. The dust of Iraq had cast off the Umayyad yoke. It has indiscriminately lifted struggles for justice into the splendid realm of creativity. This is a creativity that is acutely aware of its location in the margins. It does not fear the mainstream. As Mehdi Nazmi notes, Bujhadi sare zamane ki तिश्नगी जिसने अजीब प्यास है जो करबला से मिलती है. That which quenched the parchness of all times, it's a wondrous thirst that comes from Karbala. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Akbar Haider, for that very enlightening lecture. I'm going to introduce Sister Samra Hassan, who will formally introduce our keynote speaker, Sheikh Maulana Mukhtar Faizi.
Assalamualaikum. Hujjatul Islam Mukhtar Faizi is the director, founder, and spiritual leader at Baitul Ilm Academy in Chicago, Illinois. He has completed his education in Punjab and Qum and is a representative of Ayatollah Makaram Shirazi. He is a past principal and professor at Al-Madina Religious Seminary. Please join me in welcoming Hujjatul Islam Mukhtar Faizi, who will be speaking about the sacrifice of Imam Hussain for the humanity at large. Salam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لأهله والصلاة على أهلها أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وذكرهم بأيام الله إن في ذلك لآيات لكل صبار شكور. Respected scholars and dear brothers and sisters, first of all, let me thank Samra first that she has given a very generous and very kind introduction of me. And really you don't realize the time, how time flies, that young children of our families, which we have seen as very young ones at the lapse of their mothers and fathers, they happen to know, introduce us in these conferences and seminars. That is blessing of Allah. Recite a salawat. First of all, I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granting me tawfiq to be part of this beautiful event. I am also grateful to organizers. Particularly, I am very grateful to my brother-e-buzurg, Janab Dr. Manzoor Rizvi Sahab, for his very kind invitation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased by all of you brothers and sisters, organizers, sponsors, volunteers, and of course the participants, and reward you for undertaking this event of Imam Hussain Day. Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam doesn't need any introduction, at least in this audience. He lives in our hearts and he lives in our souls. We have grew up with Muharram, Safar, and year-long his majalis, matam, and azadari. His name is written on our hearts and our minds. So my brothers and sisters, I want to take you to another challenge, and that is, as world has changed to a global village and we are living in a pluralistic society, I think now we should reach out to others to introduce Imam Hussain to them. We need to understand our new obligation and new responsibility. We have to live in our own time and with the responsibilities of our time. Azab are mainly for ourselves, and we should continue those majalis. Those are amanat of Lady Zainab Salamullah alayha and wish of Sayyida Fatima Zahra. And according to all of our Maraji Taqleed, majalis and azadari of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam are one of best forms of seeking the nearness and the pleasures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is no question about whether we should continue our azadari and our majalis or not. Majalis and azadari are amanat, and they are our duty and responsibility. However, our processions and conferences, such as this HUSSAIN Days, should be for reaching out to people of other faiths and other backgrounds. Majalis are for ourselves, while processions and julus, which we call julus, those are for others. When we go out in downtown and in the main street to take our processions over there, the purpose is to reach out and to introduce our faith, our values, our heroes, our champions to the neighborhood and to the people of city and the people of world. So then, if we do that, we will realize the importance of knowing the local languages, local cultures, and local means and methods of communication. We don't have to have any debate on that. Whether we need English or we don't need English. Whether we need this media or we don't need this media. Because when you will reach out, then you have to speak to the people in their language. You cannot impose on the people of Manhattan to learn first Urdu and then come and appreciate Mir Anis. Mir Anis is for us. Mir Dabir is for us. And Alhamdulillah, we have enjoyed and we will keep enjoying that for generations to come. But when we go out to the people, then we have to speak to them in their language, and we need to understand their culture, and we need to understand the need of modern and contemporary means and methods of communication. In nutshell, let me say it very clearly that back home we had to do azadari only for ourselves. And while we were doing this azadari for ourselves, because we were doing in local language and according to local culture, so we had people like Prem Chand. We had those people, Hindus and Sikhs, who were speaking the same language, living the same culture. So Alhamdulillah, we were able to penetrate in their hearts, and we were able to make them azadar and lovers of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu. But now, while we have to go and hold majalis in Manhattan, by the way, I like this wonderful idea of Muharram in Manhattan. Let's recite a loud salawat for all these brothers and sisters. That was a brilliant idea of going to Manhattan and doing this kind of thing, and we should have that in every major city and in every big city. Matter of fact, next year we are thinking to do the same thing in Chicago. And we are encouraging people in other cities also. But when we will go out to reach out, then we need the language, not only language. Sometimes people can come and say that, oh, I have master and I have bachelor and I have PhD in English and I got this from Karachi or Bombay or Delhi or Lucknow. But English is not enough. Knowing the local culture is also very important. The local realities, actions and reactions, local means and methods, local culture is very important, my brothers and sisters. And that is why we need Maulana Rizwans. We need these Maulanas from the local seminaries, from the local generations. Maulana Sulaiman Abidi. Or we were listening to beautiful speech of this Maulana Hamza Saudagar. He is also local. His mother is American and father is Iranian. And basically he is from United States of America. And you heard the beautiful message. So we need these local ulama. We need these local hawzas. We need these local seminaries. We need local scholarship. We need these local people that who can speak to the people of this land in their language, and they know their mentality and they know their culture. So back home, we were doing it only for ourselves. But here, in this part of the world, we have to do two sets of azadari. Two sets of azadari. One for ourselves and the one for others. Our own azadari will be in our own native tongue. I am saying it very loudly, being the champion for English, but at the same time, I will say that we should continue our own azadari, our own majalis in our own native tongue. Majalis in Urdu, marsiya in Urdu, azadari in Urdu is necessity of our own culture and our own community and our own generation. So we will do that, we will continue that. But the azadari for others will be in local language and it will be at public places. We have gone to Manhattan, but slowly we'll go to the university campuses. We have to go to other places and then use local print and electronic media, even social media, to reach out to the people and get the message of Imam Hussain. And when we will go out to do this more important azadari, then we will need well thought plan, and other than language, means and methods, we will need a single approach to know three things in very crystal and clear manner. One, who was Hussain? There are 1001 ways to introduce Imam Hussain. But how we are going to introduce Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam to the local people, to global village, to international community, to the people in Main Street or in Manhattan? How are we going to introduce Imam Hussain? And then, who martyred him? Who was Yazid? Again, there are 1001 ways. But how we are going to introduce who were the killers of Imam Hussain? And third, why was he martyred? These are the very fundamental questions, my brothers and sisters. We need to have debate, we need to have discussion, we need to sit down, the elders, the youngsters, all around the table, and we need to discuss and make a plan and then take a single approach to the Main Street. Otherwise, we are going to confuse them. We need to speak same language and the same message. If we answer these three questions in our back home, or in traditional way, in our back home style, or in our traditional way, it is going to be counterproductive. Imam Hussain will become the topic of Muslim or non-Muslim, or Shia and Sunni debate, and or an issue 1400 years old issue. If we just speak to the people as normally we speak in our own gatherings, the tragedy of Karbala will become an issue 1400 years old issue, or a Shia Sunni issue, or a Muslim non-Muslim issue. And we all know that in this way, if this is why we have to change the approach when we go out. Imam Hussain and people like him, whether they are Anbiya or Awliya, they never belong to one time or one people or one place. You need to understand that. Introducing Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam as a man who lived 1400 years ago and talking only about those nitty-gritty issues which took place in his time if we will talk about that, people in this society have no time for listening the Muslim history. They don't know their own history. You know that many students in the schools fail the social studies because they have no interest in their own history. They have no time for listening the disputes of Arabs or Muslims or about a dispute which took place 1400 years ago. There is a living dispute in our own time in Palestine, and how many Americans are paying attention to this dispute? They have no time for any other person or for any other dispute. So that is why it is very important. And one request here, one word of caution. Please don't derive any conclusion until you listen my whole presentation. So if you have listened my half speech, listen the rest of that also, and then we will reach inshallah to good conclusion. Imam Hussain and people like Imam Hussain, whether they are Anbiya or Awliya, they never belong to one time, one people or one place. They are not single dimensional. They don't hold only one identity. Actually, they are timeless and they are common assets for all people and whole humanity. That is why we still read Surah Yusuf in Quran. We still read Surah Nuh in Quran. We still read Surah Ibrahim in Quran. We still read Surah Muhammad or Surah Al-Anbiya in Quran. If there was no relevance, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Hakim? He doesn't do anything which is pointless, which is vain, which is abas. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals these examples and these surahs in Quran, it means these people are timeless. They are inspirational figures for all times and for all people. And that is how we have to look at Anbiya and look at Awliya. So my brothers and sisters, if we go out and introduce Imam Hussain to people of all faiths, how should we introduce him to people of all faiths? Our audiences are not all Muslims. They are going to be Christians, they are going to be Jews, and there are going to be people of other faiths. When we think about that, we see Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam comes here to help us, and he has given his introduction, a beautiful introduction in Ziyarat-e-Waris, where he says, Assalamu alayka ya warisa Adama Safratillah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Nuhin Nabiyullah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Ibrahim Khalilullah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Musa Kalimullah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Isa Ruhullah. Assalamu alayka ya warisa Muhammadin. So we look to introduce Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam as waris of all Anbiya. If you are followers of these Anbiya, if you belong to Moses, if you belong to Jesus, if you belong to Noah, if you are son of Adam, so Hussain is here representative of all these Anbiya from Adam till Khat. A louder sir. So my brothers and sisters, this is one way of introducing. I can see that. So I need to know the account of my time. One more thing. So my brothers and sisters, this is how we have to introduce our Imam. That he is a common asset for people of all faith. He has something for everybody. And if he stood in Karbala, he saved the message of Adam. He saved the message of Nuh. He saved the message of Ibrahim. He saved the message of Musa. He saved the message and Shariat of Musa. And he saved the message of Isa. And he saved the message of Muhammad Mustafa. And And then there are some other things, keeping in mind the time, I will not get into those details, I need to give you some outline. Then there are certain qualities and characteristics that if we use, we can be more effective. We can draw attention of crowds, people, audience, that if instead of focusing on the genealogy or on certain other titles which we are very much used to, there is a character and there are characteristics which we should be using to introduce Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. And some of those qualities, for example, they are very attractive to masses, particularly those qualities and characteristics are: person who has given sacrifices is always respected very highly in human society. Anyone who has given sacrifice, because sacrifice is the mi'raj of human character. This makes humans special. Animals cannot give sacrifices. And also little people cannot give sacrifices. Ordinary people cannot give sacrifices. Don't ask sacrifices from ordinary people. Don't ask sacrifices from the average Joe, because average Joe cannot give the sacrifice. These are only the big hearts, the big minds, the big souls, the big characters. Only those extraordinary people can give sacrifices. And when somebody gives the sacrifice, he becomes the beloved. He becomes the beloved. And people are impressed by him. And people like him. And people become his fans because he has given sacrifices. Or people become very sympathetic to someone who was oppressed. Mazlumiyat, oppression. When somebody was oppressed and you tell the story of oppression, definitely humankind is very much appealed and they pay attention to this oppression or oppressed. The other characteristic which is very important, that is being selfless. People who were totally selfless, if they are introduced properly to the masses start worshipping them. Masses become their fans if they discover that this person who stood for, when he stood and he took the stand, it was totally selfless. It was not for any hidden agenda or his personal agenda. And all these characteristics, whether qurbani, sacrifice, madlumiyat, being selfless, or someone who had noble cause. Someone who had noble cause and far-reaching cause will also attract you. Because this is what human soul searches for. Human soul is thirsty for those people who have vision, who have depth, and who have this far-reaching agenda. And Imam alayhi salatu wasalam has such a sacrifice that Quran, which doesn't exaggerate. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a sha'ir that who will exaggerate and who will just kind of fill the needs of radif or qafiya. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, it is the divine message, it is the divine speech. And when Quran says وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِالرِّبْهٍ عَظِيمٍ, وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِالرِّبْهٍ عَظِيمٍ, so the sacrifice of Hussain is ribhin azim. There is no greater sacrifice than this. In human history, I will make a point later that this was the greatest sacrifice ever which took place in human history. Don't measure or don't look at these sacrifices only by counting numbers. Numbers are not important. The quantity is not important. It is the quality which makes the difference. Hussain, representative of 124 prophets, Hussain is here embodied where 124,000 prophets are embodied in one Hussain. It is not only one Hussain. It is Musa, it is Isa, it is Ibrahim, it is Yaqub, it is Nuh, it is Adam, it is Sulaiman, it is Dawood. It is all these Anbiya who were slaughtered in the Karbala at the day of Ashura. Hussain is not only Hussain. Hussain is Waris-e Anbiya. Totally selfless. Again, this is a topic I cannot get into it, and his cause was far-reaching. He was a reformer. Innama kharajtu li talab al-islah. He was a reformer. Sometimes we are very much tempted to use the words of revolutionary and revolution. While if you will bring the call of revolution in Manhattan, you know that many antennas will rise. So there is a better way of introducing Imam Hussain and Azadari. It is a movement of reform. And we are not choosing this word by ourselves. This is how Imam Hussain himself has introduced himself. Imam Hussain didn't say, I am a revolutionary and I want to bring a revolution. Imam Hussain says, Innama kharajtu li talabil islah fi ummatil jadid. Imam Hussain was a Muslim. Imam Hussain was a reformer. And the movement of Azadari is the movement of reform of the society. And human society is looking for reformers and the message of reform. By the way, today the stage is set for reformers at international level also, and people are ready to talk to reformers and they are ready to negotiate with reformers. So if you present yourself as reformers, then you will have the shake hand and then you will have some ears that will listen to you. But if you go and threat them with revolution, then you are calling a problem. Recite this alone. Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, if you want to understand his message, what he stood for, these are the only outline I am giving to you, my brothers and sisters. I am not that eloquent as the previous speakers, that how eloquently they spoke and they recited the poetry and beautiful poetry. So I am trying to use very simple language and give you just the outline. This is all outline. And then you have to work on it, I have to work on it, we all have to sit down and think about it and work about it. This is kind of homework for all of us. Recite the salawat. Imam Hussain stood against the dictatorship. He stood against discrimination. He stood against corruption. He stood against oppression. And if you talk about these issues, these are even the issues of our own time. Dictatorship is still everywhere in the world. Discrimination, you know, it is even in the most developed countries, still we are seeing the discrimination and corruption. Everybody knows what is happening about the corruption, and everybody knows that there is a lot of oppression in this world. So if we talk about these issues and bring Imam Hussain as a role model and the greatest inspiration to fight against discrimination, against corruption, against dictatorship, against exploitation, then, my brothers and sisters, you will have ears to listen. You will have people who will take interest in Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. But if you will bring the history of Banu Umayyah and Banu Hashim, and if you will bring the debate of Khilafat and Imamat in the Manhattan, and if you will bring all those things, then who has the interest of listening to those discussions? I'm talking about general people, outsiders. So we need to know when the audience is different, we have to speak according to the audience. Kallimun nas ala qadri uqulihim. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, and then tell the humanity that Yazid was not only danger to Islam. Yazid was not danger only for Muslims. Yazid was addicted. Yazid was drunk. Yazid was a person that who had slaughtered the only grandson of the Prophet. Yazid was the person that who has massacred the most prominent people of Muslim community or Muslim society in Karbala. And Yazid was a person that who attacked on the two most sacred places in the Islamic world, Masjidul Nabi and Masjidul Haram. And what do you think that when he was done with this, and he didn't believe in wahi, he didn't believe in any revelation, he didn't believe in sanctity of any deen, what would he do? Just next door in Sham, with the sacred places of Judaism and Christianity. After eliminating the Hussain and Ali Hussain and Ali Muhammad, then his next target would be the Judaism, the Christianity, because he is in Sham, he is in Damascus, and all the holy sites are in Palestine and in Sham. So he was a big danger for all faiths, for all religions, for all civilizations, because our civilization derives its roots from Middle East. All faiths come from Middle East. So my brothers and sisters, the service which Hussain provided, only Muslims are not the beneficiaries of that. Even the Jews are beneficiaries. Even the Christians are beneficiaries. Even the other civilizations are beneficiaries. And everybody needs to understand Hussain is not hero of only Muslims. He is a hero of all faiths and all civilizations.
Hussainiyat Zindabad, Hussainiyat Zindabad, Hussainiyat Zindabad, Yazidiyat Murdabad, Yazidiyat Murdabad. आवाज़ बुलंद नारे सलावत. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Let me conclude this. I will cut down some of my presentation here, but only make one point. If people today remember and honor people like Gandhi and Abraham Lincoln and people like Nelson Mandela, everybody is today shedding the tears for Nelson Mandela. The other day I received the email from ISNA headquarters that on Friday, during the Friday prayers, all the IMAM of Jum'ah should speak about Nelson Mandela and remember him in Khutbah Jum'ah because of his sacrifices and because of his services for humanity. ISNA headquarters, the CARE headquarters, the ICNA, all these national Muslim networks requested Imam Jum'ah during the Khutbah Jum'ah, remember Nelson Mandela. I sent the email to Dr. Saeed, he is a good friend of mine. I said, what about Hussain during the day of Ashura? Why don't you send the email to all Imam Jum'ah that during the day of Ashura, you should talk about Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain gave bigger sacrifices for humanity or Nelson Mandela? Nelson Mandela, we have great respect for him. We are his fans. And he came to our Maraje Tabligh and he came to our Wali Faqih and he sat down even when he was old man and he was asked to sit on the chair, but he said no, in front of Khamenei I will sit on the carpet. I will sit on the carpet. So we are his fan. We love the man. But my brothers and sisters, if people are fans of Gandhi and they are fans of Nelson Mandela and Abraham Lincoln, how they can't be fan of Hussain if they discover who was Hussain? If they discover who was the Hussain. And my brothers and sisters, who is guilty? Who is responsible? We are keeping Hussain only for Shias. We are keeping Hussain only for our own community and our own people and only in the Char Diwari of our own Imambada, mostly in basements. And we are not bringing Hussain to the main street. We are not bringing Hussain to the global village. We are not portraying. We have the greatest asset world is waiting for. World is looking for a true leader, a true inspiration who can provide the message of peace, message of reform, message which can soothe the minds and souls and spirits and hearts. And that is only Hussain. Hussain has the message for intellect, and Hussain has touch to our hearts. Hussain is the one stimulates our thinking, and Hussain brings the tears in our eyes. Who else in the world can you point out that his name, simply his name, can bring tears in eyes, other than Hussain? Who can bring millions of people barefoot in harsh winter and in very hot summers, bringing them all out? Only a powerful man like Hussain. And there is no other man that who can stand next to Hussain, who can bring these millions of people out. So Hussain is power, energy. Hussain is a message. Hussain is an inspiration. And Hussain is our pride, my brothers and sisters. We need to bring Hussain out. We need to bring Hussain in street. We need to bring Hussain in media. We need to bring Hussain in the global village, and then take the pride. We are followers of this Hussain. Then, my brothers and sisters, you will see how people will come and they will love Hussain, and they will love Hussain much more than what they love these other reformers and these other people. And when it comes to hating the Yazid, again to understand, today, finally world has realized who was butcher of Baghdad. Today world has finally realized who was Hosni Mubarak. And today world has realized who was Muammar Gaddafi. When they discovered, now they hate Muammar Gaddafi, they hate Hosni Mubarak, they hate Saddam, they go all the way and go and remove these people. And today, if people understand who was Yazid, if they discover who was Yazid, then my brothers and sisters, the whole world will hate Yazid and his ancestors for all those things what they have done. But we have to do the job. We have to expose these people to the world, and we have to show them, if you dislike Gaddafi, if you dislike Hosni Mubarak, if you dislike Saddam Hussein, then you must dislike Yazid, because Yazid is the root of all the evil. Thank you very much, and may Allah.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Mukhtar Faizi. I'm going to now request Dr. Manzoor Rizvi to come to the podium for the closing speech and vote of thanks.
Assalamu alaikum. Respected ulama, dear brothers and sisters, it's namaz time approaching, so I just want to see, given this opportunity to thank this gracious presence of all ulama and the audience. Everything has been said in short and that could be said, but before closing, I feel obliged to reiterate Imam Hussain saying that to live and let others live, and let us be a free person with legitimate rights and responsibilities. This is the message of the Creator and the message of all the prophets, all the saints, and this was the message of Gandhi, and recently the message of Mandela. And this was the message for which Imam Hussain sacrificed his life and the life of the family and everything. We do love Hussain Day and similar programs. We do need Hussain Day and similar programs, as our respected Maulana has said. And doing so, we want to come closer to Imam Hussain and stay away from the people from those jihadis who kill innocent people to go to heaven, who kill innocent people, children, infants, ladies in mosques, churches and synagogues and Imam Baras. This is to come too close to Imam Hussain will mean that to go away, stay away from there. I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please do not send us to that heaven which these murderers want to go. I sincerely hope you have enjoyed and learned something from this learned panel. I thank Dr. Karen Russell, who came from Toronto and for her beautiful speech. Dr. Akbar Haider from Houston, Hujjatul Islam Maulana Faizi from Chicago. They were all busy people, and we gave him very short notices to come in here, but they came. And of course, our Maulana Rizwan Rizvi, who belongs to our home, and really he came from Virginia just for this purpose. I thank every member of the organizing committee for this job well done. They really worked very hard to bring this thing for a couple of weeks at least. And special thanks to President Mr. Bakar Rizvi. My special thanks to the sponsors of the program and all of you wonderful audience who came to join us in this endeavor. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
حد ہوا کرتی ہے ہر رنج کے افسانے کی، درد سہنے کی، الم سہنے کی، غم کھانے کی، کلمہ گویوں کو ایک بات ہے سمجھانے کی، رسم ہے سارے مسلمانوں میں دفنانے کی، پر محمد کے نواسے کو کفن تک نہ دیا۔ اہل دولت بھی تھے، اعزاز کے سامان بھی تھے، مذہب و ملت و اقوام کے سلطان بھی تھے، پیر و شرع بھی تھے، صاحب ایمان بھی تھے، 700 ظالموں میں حافظ قرآن بھی تھے، پر محمد کے نواسے کو کفن تک نہ دیا۔ غسل میت کو بسط رنج و محن دیتے ہیں، اور عزیزوں کو تشفی کے سخن دیتے ہیں، بے وطن ہو تو مدد اہل وطن دیتے ہیں، چندہ کر کر کے مسلمان کفن دیتے ہیں، پر محمد کے نواسے کو کفن تک نہ دیا۔